Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. Today I'm going to be talking about a Giller Prize long-listed book, The Octopus Has Three Hearts by Rachel Rose. And this book is a bit of a strange one. It's a collection of short stories. If you have watched some of my other videos, you might know that I try to go into books without reading the blurb. It tends to make false equivalences with other texts and either hype it up or sort of make it diminutive for me, where I'm trying to relate it to another text that I had a positive experience with. Usually is why they conflate the two. And this kind of worked to my detriment, actually, in this one. And let me show you exactly why. So in opening it says, "For anyone who has ever loved a beast, then there isn't anyone you couldn't learn to love once you've heard their story," a Mr. Rogers quote. Next, "All I'm trying to say here is you just have these sick ideas, and instead of going to a shrink and paying the shrink, we write them and you pay us," a quote from Stephen King in conversation with George R.R. Martin. So what I think going into this book, having read those, which usually signal or telegraph to the reader exactly what you're going to find, what makes it cohesive in a short story collection, is human-to-human empathy, maybe notions of restorative justice with Mr. Rogers involved, probably characters that are, on the margins, in the fringes, possibly they've done something bad and they need some kind of forgiveness, right? And in some instances, you'd be correct. But what it doesn't prepare you for, I think at least, is the fact that all of these stories revolve around animals, as if animals somehow need some kind of fostered empathy. I think everybody on the planet basically has empathy for animals and know about asymmetrical relationships between animals and their owners or people who come upon animals, basically. This isn't, I don't know, charting new ground or something for me. But if I had read the blurb, it would have been made more explicit that these stories are about people on the margins who specifically don't find human-to-human connection, usually, and are cast in some weird light, like the marginalization is from being a victim or being a perpetrator or just being odd or strange or something like that, which, first of all, I don't like that conflation with marginalization at all, but if we roll with that, the conceit that you have to make with each of these stories gets very tired right away, which is why I made it 4 stories in and then DNF'd it. Every story feels like it's making the exact same point, and every story, again, conflates, the ones that I've read, obviously, conflates marginalization in, I think, problematic ways, in very white ways. For instance, there's a story of a woman who is attacked, but then her sister thinks that she looks great because she ends up in the hospital, loses a whole bunch of weight, and still has, problems that she's been dealing with, gains the weight back. And then we find out that she has been sexually abused as a child. Her parents and her mother know about this, and finally she finds the strength to cut them out. But I was struggling with how it was characterized, because it really makes it seem, once I read the blurb of this, that everybody is sort of like a bad person or unlovable or something like that, and that characterization with the victim is a problematic one, to say the least. But what ends up happening is she finds her attacker randomly at a McDonald's later on, and that attacker is a homeless person with rats as pets, 2 of them, I think. And she takes a sock full of coins that she carries around for both protection and for giving people money if they ask for it or something. So it's trying to straddle the, like, she's not completely devoid of empathy, but she's trying to protect herself. And she finds this guy, sees the rats, and in an effort to, I don't know, get him back, and probably also a fear reaction of seeing him there at the McDonald's, she hits the guy, he passes out, she offers the rats meat, and the rats come to her. And then the rats end up being like her support structure, in the sense that her parents and her sister don't want to support her anymore. And so she sort of retreats into this sort of situation. One, we've seen this story quite a few times anyway, but again, the conflation that she is a bad person because she, like, hit a guy who was sleeping, but is also the person that knifed her and put her in a hospital, making her like a unlovable bad person. And then also the aspect of her being a victim of sexual violence that we find out later is not to my taste. Then we have a story about a person who, again, is the perpetrator. So we're shifting the lens right after that to a person who has perpetrated sex crimes against people and who has been the victim of that as well. So it's a traumatic cycle that is playing out. He mistakenly saves a dog and then has to sort of perpetuate his life in order to care for the dog. And in this, we have like a weird him seeking out a mystical solution by talking to a Eastern philosophical monk about this. And it's just a story that doesn't quite work, and again is trying to like put this notion about animal to human contact being like more unique and, I guess, interesting than humans have the ability to forgive and forget and to have restorative justice processes as well. Except none of the stories that I read in this have restorative justice, so it completely seems to dismiss that idea, which is not in our judicial system, sure, but I mean it's something that's been around for a very long time. And then we have this older lady who is dogs for pets, who is ascribing the notion that people who she has lost in her life, good and bad, her family members and people who have harmed her daughter, who was killed in a domestic violence interaction, also coming into her life through dogs. So every time she meets like a new dog and it seems to come to her or whatever, she'll look at it and then be like, oh, I know who you are, you're X person. And she has a friend who is Asian and offers the sort of like Eastern philosophical bent as well in that. She ends up hitting a dog with her truck and then dropping it off at a, rescue clinic, vet place or whatever, and being sort of shamed into paying for the dog to be fixed, repaired, and, the cost of that thing, which she can't really afford to do. And she thinks that that dog is the reincarnation of the person that killed her daughter. And then so later she ends up beating the dog, but the dog forgives her anyway, because this Eastern philosophical stuff needs to be in there for whatever reason. And the reason why she does this is because the dog that she has, who is the reincarnation of her daughter, seems to forgive that other dog. And so she also forgives the dog after beating it. So I think this collection might be for people who, I don't know, are hyper empathetic with animals, who maybe need to foster some empathy for animals. People who are more into, I don't know, non-substantive changes for systemic problems and marginalization. and people who aren't bothered by the conflation of marginalization, problematization of all of these different identities into one group. For me, it just read pretty plain. It wasn't very evocative, like I said, very Hemingway-esque. It wasn't very enticing. I didn't like the messaging, and if I did like the messaging, it made it in 1 point or 2 point already, and there's still like 8 or 9 more stories to go after that. Some people who are really into irony that ignores all other circumstances might be into this book, as the blurb at the end says, Rachel Rose's finely tuned sense of irony is evident in this collection, which embraces the strange and unexpected, exploring the outer limits of empathy and forgiveness. Her flawed and broken characters, which may range far from readers' own lived experiences, reveal universal elements of the human condition and the curious redemption of the human-animal bond. If you have read it already, I'd love to know your thoughts on it, and especially if elements of this did work for you, what those were, and if you thought my reading was fair on it, essentially. Otherwise, I'll see you next video. Bye.